man. You cannot marry a woman without gills. You're from two different worlds. Oh, I've wasted my life.
Fans of the channel may have seen me have a slight meltdown yesterday due to Future State The Flash #2 and DC's incessant, constant need to just eviscerate Wally West as a character, just assassinate his character over and over and over. If it's not Tom King, it's Scott Snyder undoing what Scott Lobdell did, or it's Brandon Vietti making Wally West a murder for eternity now, while Barry Allen gets to watch him a few seconds outside of history. And I don't know. I'm sure that a lot of people, the feedback was, Wes, stop taking things so seriously. I know sometimes people say, step back from that ledge. And here to talk with me about whether I'm taking comics too seriously or other fans take comics too seriously is my good friend, El Percherino himself, the Pooh of Comics. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And right off the gate, I mean, if you're not supposed to take comics seriously, then what's the point?
That's my thing. It's like, hey, listen, I have an entire channel dedicated to comic books. You would think that DC and Marvel and the other publishers would want me to take their stories and their characters seriously as I'm out here promoting a lot of things. Now, some people say I might be too negative, but hey, I promote the good stuff as much as I can, but there's a lot of crap going on right now. It becomes overwhelming at times. You know what I mean?
Well, sure. I mean, it's always good to try and have a balance for yourself. And if you feel yourself getting too negative, of course, read some comics you love, even if they're old, just so you can not fully just get lost in that place. But I mean, this argument that you shouldn't take comics too seriously. I mean, how are you not supposed to? They're stories. They're meant to entertain you. They're meant to make you think or laugh or cry or whatever it might be. They're designed to solicit an emotion, and there's a long history, and for that matter, the companies desperately do want you to take them seriously because they're charging you $5.99 or more for them, so they want you to take them very seriously.
Yeah, obviously, when you have the great moment from DC Comics or DC Universe Rebirth, where Barry Allen finally realizes Wally West is there and brings him back to reality, and they finally embrace, and he says, how could I have ever forgotten you? You're supposed to take that seriously. It's supposed to draw a tear in your eye, and it was very effective. And that's like one of the things. These characters have been around for so long, and you've followed them along during these journeys. How am I not supposed to get emotionally attached to some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, it's nonsense. I mean, when people who make that argument is they want you to be emotionally attached to love them, or to feel what they feel, but they don't want you to be emotionally attached in any kind of negative way. And so when some of these efforts are either phoned in or very repetitive or poor, and you call them out, then suddenly it's, oh, you're taking this too seriously. Take my story less seriously. That's not really what they meant. What they mean is just don't criticize what I've done. That's what they mean.
Embrace what you enjoyed and then forget all the parts that you didn't enjoy. Now, obviously, we are getting through the first week of Future State, and I'll admit, the finale of most of these stories are very, very downers. Like even the Swamp Thing story, which I think is fantastic, like is borderline on a classic all-time classic Swamp Thing story. He doesn't exactly survive.
No, it's a good story. I mean, Swamp Thing was a great story, and it was a somewhat of a downer ending, but also one with hope. It's a story that fits. It's a story that you get a complete journey. I mean, my criticism of Swamp Thing is that 2 issues were not enough. It would have been good to have the story longer. Where's Bendis when you need him to decompress out this thing? I'm kidding. That would not work. But that was a great story. I thought the Wonder Woman story with Yara Flor was, again, it was kind of a downer ending, but it did give a somewhat of a complete journey. I like her personality best in that comic as opposed to some of the others. So we are getting these kind of downer endings for some of these, but in some cases it feels like that down ending is earned, and in some case it feels cheaply manipulative. Yes,
it does feel like let's subvert expectations, or I don't know. Can the entire DC future just be hopelessness? Is that what DC Comics is trying to project with this Future State event? Because it feels like, after this final first week of comics, the last issue of it, that almost feels like that's what DC Comics wants you to take away from it.
Yeah, and that wasn't. I didn't think that was Scott Snyder's message in Death Metal. I think the idea that that you could have hope. I don't know. Superman Metropolis ended sort of definitely positive. Metropolis is restored and he's going to be the savior. Harley Quinn was kind of neither here nor there. It just kind of ended. But it is hard to pick up the Flash and not feel like they're just either screwing with you, or they, for no other reason, they just want to lean into this idea that everything is screwed.
Obviously, you read Heroes in Crisis. Maybe you weren't as loud as I was with your objections, but I know that you had some problems with the narrative on that story. Why keep going back to this well with Wally West? Like, he's not my favorite character. I am invested in the character, but not to the degree that I am with Hal Jordan or Nightwing or even Batman or Superman. And it's still, like, it infuriates me just as someone who likes the character but not loves the character. Like, why do they just keep the character deconstruction, the character assassination, specifically Wally West and the legacy characters? I'll never understand it.
It's legacy characters from a very specific time period. I think it's the Gen X people who grew up. I mean, Wally West was their Flash. If you grew up in comics and you were in kind of the 80s, 90s, Wally West was kind of your Flash. And I think that there's some desire in comic writers and the companies today to really want to screw with that particular slice of characters. You see them always kind of getting hosed, whether it's Marvel or DC, by the way. That era, they want to make bad. I don't quite get why. With Wally West, it's confusing because I have no idea what people are thinking. There's such a positive reaction to the rebirth moment, as you mentioned. And then there's been, I would say, almost too positive a reaction anytime they do something remotely good for Wally now. Like the whole Scott Lobdell and Brett Booth story where they tried to redeem Wally West a bit after Heroes in Crisis. It wasn't an amazing story. It was good, but it ended positively for Wally. And you saw a big positive reaction from fans, despite the fact it was a fine story, but it's not like the best story in the world. And yet, even there, you saw people just begging for something good to happen to this character. But then, by counter, you almost see the company want to deliberately just screw with him over and over. I don't know why. I don't know if it's one way of kind of jabbing at that generation, or if they feel like, hey, here's a group of fans that we can really just constantly subvert their expectations, pull on their heartstrings, make it bad. I don't get what they're doing, but it is tiresome to see this stuff happen over and over and over with Wally. It's not original anymore. It's not fun. Like, most of the Wally West fans are getting to the place of just wanting the character not to appear anywhere at all.
Yeah, that's why I said kill the character off. I also made an analogy when I was talking about Flash Forward, and then what Joshua Williamson did in Flash 750, where he provided a little bit of an explanation for why Wally did what happened in Heroes in Crisis. Reverse Flash was manipulating him, and that's why he felt hopeless in the moment and didn't think anyone would believe him. But my analogy was, it was like taking a football-sized suppository. Sure, it relieves some of the pain and some of the symptoms, but it's still really uncomfortable knowing that Wally West lost hope in all the other heroes and himself, and end up framing people, going to the future, killing himself. He still did all that, and just to keep doubling down, and then you're not supposed to take things seriously. Don't. I'm supposed to take these things seriously. It's just so frustrating when you see these things over and over. And I don't know, how do you handle? You always seem so cool about everything.
No, I mean, I don't like this stuff, and I get really frustrated by it. To me, it's on a number of different fronts. It's money off the table. You have a committed group of people who will spend that $5.99 on this character, and you keep doing this. You're pushing them to leave. And you see this slow erosion in numbers. A lot of it is because they're taking some core characters people want to spend money on, and they're just, wasting them. They're doing stuff like this, which doesn't bring in this comic right here with the Flash, and what they're doing with Wally now for Future State. It's going to turn off Wally West fans. It's not going to bring in new Barry Allen fans. I mean, there's no additive here. It's all subtractive. Nobody wants to read a downer Flash story about how, Alan is now a ghost and has to watch Wally murder people, and Wally's just going to go off and kill. It's like, nobody wants that story at this point. So it's just, this is all subtractive. I don't know. It makes me mad. I definitely get really frustrated by this. I get mostly frustrated particularly in a shop when you have people come in and say, I want this off my pull list. I'm done. That's the most frustrating part of all. It's like, here's somebody who had their cash out ready to spend it, and you drove them to not wanting to do it anymore. And with comic collectors, that's really hard. Collectors are so fixated on this idea that they have to have everything, that they have to have a completed run. To drive somebody to break that kind of core part of their personality is tough.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you this. I'm not going to be less invested in the characters. I'm still going to be who I am. And when I say BS, I'm going to call it out. And if I get too emotional about it, so be it. But, it's part of who I am. I take these things seriously. I'm emotionally invested in a lot of my hobbies, more so in comics than other things. But, to the whole, you need to not take comics so seriously.
That's a nonsense. It's a nonsense.
What are you doing here if you're not taking it seriously?
Yeah, the people who are not taking it seriously are the people who are not spending any money on it and not helping anything at all. Look, you should take this seriously. It's a real thing. It's a real thing you're spending money on. It's characters that are designed to elicit an emotional response. That's a nonsense answer. And if you have somebody telling you that, because I see that all the time on Twitter, stop taking this so seriously. The person saying that is a stupid person. And you should recognize that. Don't let them get under your skin. They're just trying to screw with you.
All right, so Perch, you are the most hopeful man in comic book YouTube. That isn't a shill. There are some shills that are more hopeful because I think they're just selling BS. But I think you, for the most part, are a straight shooter, or I wouldn't have you on the channel. Can you sell me on hope for Wally West in Flash in the future? Is there any hope for Wally West?
I think that at some point a writer is going to come along. Assuming that, I think a writer will come along at some point who will be able to put this very simple problem together. If I deliver a Wally West story that doesn't involve him killing people or murdering people, people will buy it. And when they buy it, then I will be able to say I sold a top-selling comic. And when I can say that, I will get other gigs and more money. I think somebody will come around with that thought process at some point, and we will get a story. Now, unfortunately, the half empty side of that glass is very shortly after somebody else will come along and go, hey, if I wreck this character, then everybody will be shocked. And I can say I wrote shocked things, and my pals on Twitter and various comic news shill sites that review things will say I subvert expectations, and I'm pretty cool. And the cycle will continue.
Yeah, and also, we don't need more stories about Wally and Barry like in a Speed Force dong measuring contest. They're supposed to be best friends. Just treat them like that. They don't have to be at odds with each other. It's always weird. Comes off as odd. It
comes off as so strange. This like the Speed Force dog measuring contest is perfect. I hate it. I hated it when they would, like, Superman and Flash be like, hey, let's have a race to see who's fastest. Once you do that once, you don't need to keep doing it. And it's way dumber when it's Wally and Barry. It's
they're essentially like brothers.
Yeah, it's a Speed Force dong measuring contest. We will forever dub it that.
Absolutely. So, Perch, I want to say thank you very much for joining me here today, letting me know I'm not insane. It's okay to take these characters seriously. DC and Marvel definitely want me to take these characters seriously, and I'm going to, whether I like what they did or I didn't, and I will continue to be a vocal critic, either for or against whatever the stories are, and being very meh and bored when it's in the middle.
Yep, that's absolutely. Can't agree more.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.